This morning's gospel reading is only 4 verses long and will be the focus of my message this morning from the 10th chapter of the Gospel according to Luke. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken away from her." May these words of my mouth and may the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O God, for it is you and you alone who is our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. It's just a brief, short little story, and it's Jesus himself who delivers the punchline. "Martha, Martha," he tells his hostess, "you are worried and distracted by many things, yet there is need of only one thing." This story has a particular significance for me because it was this short passage from the 10th chapter of Luke's Gospel that the pastor used as the basis for the sermon that he preached at my Grandma New Year's funeral. In that funeral homily, he compared my Grandma New Year to Martha from this story. In some ways, that is a fair comparison. Because in the story, Martha is hustling and bustling, right? She is zipping around the house as she takes care of many different things. Martha is a multitasker. And that was true of my grandma as well. Well, you should have seen her hustling and bustling around the house when it was time to prepare Thanksgiving dinner. She would put Martha to shame. She was a professional accountant who voluntarily did all of her family members' taxes, and I can tell you right now that H&R Block had nothing on my Grandma New Year. And over the years, she served on the school board, the town council, the church council. I am not sure that there was a council or committee in Valentine, Nebraska that she didn't serve on at some point in her life. Like Martha, my Grandma New Year was a multitasker. But at the time of her funeral, I didn't really like that this was the passage that the pastor chose for her funeral homily. Because in the story of Mary and Martha, it sort of sounds like Jesus is scolding Martha, right? In fact, at that point in my life, any time that I had ever heard this passage preached in a church service, had always been preached like Martha was a busy but unspiritual person who was missing out on a relationship with Jesus, while Mary was the one who understood what was really important in life. In fact, usually when this text was preached in churches, I would hear the pastor set up the two different sisters as two different personality archetypes, with one sister being busy to the point of being frantic, while the other sister is calm, serene, and spiritual. We would hear how, from the pastor, how one sister was right and the other sister was wrong. And then the pastor would always encourage the members of the congregation to be like Mary and not like Martha. And that's why it bugged me at the time that the pastor chose to compare my Grandma New Year to Martha. Because Martha had always been presented in this text as the cautionary tale of how not to behave. Have you heard this text preached this way? Nod if you have heard this text preached this way. Am I the only one? No. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I needed to hear. Maybe I just had a string of bad pastors. Well, now that I am the one in the pulpit, I'm not sure that that is a good reading of this text. First of all, I think that we should be wary whenever a preacher, or anyone else for that matter, tries to fit everybody into one of two categories or archetypes. Do you know the old joke? There's two types of people in the world. The type of people who think there are only two types of people in the world, and the type that know better. But more than that, I don't think that Jesus was scolding Martha in this story. I don't think that's what he's doing here. I don't think he's scolding her. This seems like a misreading of the text, first based on the larger story of the Gospel of Luke, right? According to Luke, Jesus is an old friend of the family. And this is Mary and Martha that we're talking about. They are Jesus' close, personal friends. These are the sisters of his good friend Lazarus, whom he wept when Lazarus died, right? He knows and cares about these people. But more importantly, the Gospels make it clear that Jesus has a servant's heart. Right, this is the same Jesus who, at the Last Supper, tied a towel around his waist, got down on his hands and knees, and washed the feet of his disciples. I am convinced that Jesus was not afraid to do domestic chores every now and again. Right? I am convinced that 9 times out of 10, the man who washed the disciples' feet would have been up with Martha, helping her to prepare the meal and helping her to wash the dishes afterwards. I don't think that Jesus is scolding Martha. I think that's what is happening in this brief story, is that Jesus, seeing how busy and distracted Martha has become, is inviting her to pause and rest, to lay down some of those burdens that she has been carrying, and to join Mary and the other disciples for just a moment to sit and rest and listen. I think that Jesus loved Martha enough to see that while she was a very capable woman, she was starting to get overwhelmed and she needed a break. And Jesus was just encouraging her to take one. And that sounds pretty good to me. When you start to feel overwhelmed to take a break, it sounds pretty good to me. Because like my Grandma New Year, I am one hell of a multitasker. It's true. I have got a lot of irons in the fire, folks. I am a pastor, which by itself requires a wide amount of knowledge, right? You have to know the Bible. You have to know how to write. You have to know how to be a good public speaker. You have to be a good administrator. You have to be able to work with a staff. You have to be a capable executive. You have to know a thing or two about finances and accounting and advertising. And in today's world, at least, you need to know a thing or two about social media marketing. Being a pastor pastor is a 24/7 job where somebody might just drop by my house at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning needing assistance, like happened last night. Called me back from the carnival. At the same time, I'm involved in the wider church. I am the president of the South Dakota Conference Board of Directors. I am also the president of the Tri-Conference Board of Directors. I'm also working on a second master's degree. I already have completed 105 credit hours of graduate level coursework, and I still got 18 more credit hours to go. I have a 40-page final paper due on Saturday. Oh, and I'm also thinking about starting my own consulting practice, just as a little side job. And 99% of the time, I got this. Maybe like 98% of the time. But every once in a while, man, I just start to feel overwhelmed. I feel like I've gotten way too much on my plate, and I start to get stressed out. And then the anxiety about how much I have to do starts to make me feel paralyzed, and I have a hard time doing what I need to do because I'm so anxious about how much I have to do. And then I start to feel like maybe I need to do some screaming, or maybe some crying. I know that I'm not alone in this. I mean, that's life, right? 99% of the time, you got this. You have a job, and sometimes that job is stressful, but you can handle it. You have a home to maintain, and sometimes those chores do start to pile up and get backed up, but you can handle it. You have relationships with people who sometimes make you crazy, but you can handle it. You have finances to monitor, and sometimes it starts to feel like there's a little bit too much money or too much month at the end of the money, right? But you can handle it. 99% of the time, you can handle it. Until you can't. And then you start to feel overworked, overburdened, overwhelmed. And you feel like you need something. When the normal coping mechanisms start to fail, you need something. In that 1% of the time when you just can't handle it all, you need something. And many times, when we feel like we need something, we start to think that what we need is maybe something more. That is such an American response, isn't it? When we feel overwhelmed, we think that we need something more. More will fix the problem. If only we had more money, maybe that would fix the problem. If we had more stuff, more toys, maybe that would fix the problem. If we had more vacation days, or more drinks at the end of the workday, or more space. And what I hear Jesus saying to Martha is less. You don't need more, but less. Martha, Martha, Jesus says, you really need only one thing. In all of these tasks, amid all of this stuff, really, there's just one thing that truly matters. And that is, in the words of the psalmist, to be still and know that God is God. That one thing will put all the rest of the things in perspective. We have a word for that, you know. We call it the Sabbath. Sabbath time. It's a time of rest, of renewal, of rejuvenation. And in our increasingly busy and fast-paced world, I am really starting to think that keeping some Sabbath time in your week might just be one of the most, if not the most, radical and difficult of all of the Ten Commandments. I mean, feeling busy, it's something that starts to make us feel important. Have you noticed that in our society it has become a bragging right to be the busiest person in the circle of people that you're talking to be able to list all of the things that you are doing. And I'm not judging here. I'm as bad as anyone, right? Did you know that I'm the president of 2 different conference boards? And in the midst of all this, we together, we need to hear the words of Jesus as he says to us again, there is need of only one thing. Remember, friends, that even God rested on the 7th day of creation. God needed a break. And if God needed a break, then you do too. Remember, friends, one time in the Bible, Elijah was like, God, I am so mad, I want to die. And God said, hey, Elijah, here's some food. Why don't you have a nap? And so Elijah slept and ate and decided that things were not so bad. Never underestimate the spiritual power and the spiritual practice of napping and snacking. Sisters and brothers, we need Sabbath time in our lives. We need times of rest. We need to hear the words of Jesus calling us to less and not more. We need less in our lives because when we start reducing, when we start moving towards less, it reminds us that deep down there is need, really, of only one thing. So, my sisters and brothers, I invite you right now to pause. Breathe deep. Feel God's presence. And in this sanctuary, in this Sabbath time, be still. Know and trust that God is God. Remember, everything will work out in the end. And if it doesn't, then it is not yet the end. Amen.